Hello and welcome back to Jo's Art History podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical with me, your host and your resident art historian, Jo McLaughlin. It's episode 48 and this week I'm joined by UK-based photographer Rachel Vogeleisen to talk about one of art history's greatest female painters, Artemisia Gentileschi. Artemisia Gentileschi was an Italian Baroque painter and she's considered one of the most accomplished 17th century artists. She has an incredible backstory working in her father's studio, and she was producing professional works by the age of 15 and went on to amass an unbelievably impressive career, finding patrons at a time where both the art world and society paid very little attention to female artists in the field. Many of Gentileschi's paintings feature women from myths, allegories and the Bible, including a lot of victims and warriors. In today's episode, Rachel and I sit down to discuss 4 such works by Artemisia, where we break down the meaning behind each piece, why Artemisia herself has become a feminist icon, and discuss the stories which Artemisia depicts within her works still very much ring true in today's society. If you haven't heard of Artemisia Gentileschi, you're in for a treat. She is, in my opinion, untouchable in terms of skill and is right up there with some of the best painters, I think, ever. Artemisia is known particularly for her ability to depict female figures with great naturalism and for her skill in handling colour to express dimension and drama within her works. What's particularly interesting about Artemisia is that she very much disappeared within the history of art and was very much overshadowed for a long time by an event which happened to her when she was 18 years old, where she was raped by a member of her father's artistic studio. Today, however, she is regarded as one of art history's finest, and Rachel is the perfect person to take you on this journey and explain just why. She is incredibly passionate about Artemisia's outpour, and it was a real privilege to speak to her for an hour about this amazing artist. So all that's left to do is sit back and relax as Rachel and I discuss the brilliant Artemisia Gentileschi. This is the first time that you came across Artemisia.
I came across Artemisia the first time. It was probably the late 80s in France. There was a movie who came out about her story, and I can't remember if it was a French or Italian movie, but I was fascinated by her story. First of all, I love Renaissance painting, but I rarely saw women painting at that time. And for the first time, I heard about a woman painter, and she was painting at the time of the Renaissance, where women were not allowed to have an education. They didn't have any freedom at all. They belonged to their dad or their brothers, their husband. So here you have a woman who is becoming a painter. She's learning to paint with her father, and then she becomes independent and well-known, traveling all over Europe and selling a painting, finding benefactors. So this is how I came across, and I think her painting is so strong and so bold, and I've always been fascinated by women trailblazers, especially at times where women couldn't do anything. They really had to find through the convention. They really had to fight for their freedom. They had to go beyond what people would allow them to do. And she was, that's really fascinating me. And of course, I love her work. It's really, really strong. It's bold. I think she went even further than her male counterpart in what she painted.
I completely agree with you. She's somebody that in the last 18 months, particularly since the National Gallery in London had their sort of blockbuster show on her, that she's having, dare I say, a renaissance in and of herself. People are suddenly paying attention to her because she very much disappeared from the history books, but she is incredible. But she's somebody, I think maybe it's because she's a woman, that her story and particularly certain events that happened to her in life have perhaps taken away or very much sort of read into. People love to sort of use her experiences and traumas of her life and read into her paintings. But what, regardless of her story, you cannot take away the skill and the passion and power that are behind some of these works that we're going to talk about today. Could you just give people just a very quick overview of Artemisia? Who was she, and when did she operate, and where could we have found her?
Artemisia she was living in Italy. She grew up in Italy. She learned painting with her father at the time of the Renaissance. She in the 17th century, so she was under the influence of Caravaggio, and she started to paint quite young. And she moved around a lot, in Italy. I think at some point she even lived in the UK.
And again, it's so unusual because this was a woman at this time doing this. She has an amazing history. She was one of the first women or I think the first woman to be accepted into the Academy of Arts in Florence. She trained under her father, who was a painter. She lived in Rome, Florence, Naples, like you said. She came to London and lived in London for a little while. She helped her father on a fresco commission for the court of Charles I. And she also went to Spain and worked, I'm sure she went to Spain and worked on something for Philip IV of Spain at the same time, or during her lifetime. So she was incredibly well traveled and also well respected, which sounds like something that should just be so obvious, but we can't really stress enough that she was essentially, until she was married, under the control of her father and her brothers. And she had she's just somebody who is completely fascinating in her talent. And she was quite young as well when she started exhibiting on her own and showing her things. So it's I just think there's just nobody like her within the history of art.
No, I agree. I think the thing is, there's very little women artists at the time. I don't know, maybe there have been others, but we haven't heard about this. But I think Artemisia really, she's really standing out. And what is really weird, as you said, she disappeared a bit from the history books. And I don't know why she disappeared, because she seemed to have known late 80s, and then suddenly she disappeared again. I don't know why, and I agree, maybe the people are talking too much about the trauma that happened and forgetting a bit about her painting. But I'm glad she's having a renaissance again, that people are discovering her art and also the women behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's got a really, what I love about her art is that she portrays strong women sort of fighting back, women who are sure of themselves and stand their ground. And I really love that, because it's something, and she gives it a feminine power. As a woman, I think she really gets into, okay, how would this make me feel? How would this look? And I think the first painting that we're going to talk about, which is just I think one of the best paintings within the history of art, is Judith beheading, I'm going to say this name wrong, Holofernes?
It's Holofernes. Yeah, that's
Holofernes.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first time I saw this painting, I had a shock, because I realizing that this was a woman, and because also I've grown up with the idea that women should be quiet, should be having a stance and everything. But here you have a woman who is not scared, first of all, to show gory details, to show two women together against a man, and it's super bold, super powerful. You have very specific details and blood splashing, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, if a woman is allowed to do that, a woman is allowed to paint this, a woman is allowed to show her strength. So I think the message in this painting is I think it's very, very strong, because you think, oh my gosh, yes, as a woman, we're allowed to be like this. We don't just have to be decent, or we're allowed to show, to be aggressive, to be bold, to be strong. And I think, yes, this painting was really a shock for me. I think with the first time I saw it, especially if you see a man being beheaded, the head cut, it's really, and everything in this painting, I think, what I love, of course, is the drama she puts into it with the lighting. You have lights and shadows very strongly, and then she uses the primary colors. And it's all like a drama theme in a theater. And I guess this must be must have been the influence of her father, because I knew her father was quite a lot into painting with dramatic and theater. But yeah, this is, I think, as I agree with you, this is really an amazing painting, a very, very strong impact, and with a very, very strong message as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that about her dad, actually. I didn't really read anything about him in preparation for the talk, but I'll definitely have a look, because her dad, who also goes by the name Gentileschi, and I think there's some works of him in the National Gallery as well.
Exactly, yeah, they were talking about it especially, and you could see it's very theater staged, so you could see the influence of Artemisia, but somewhat, because most of the painting are also very like a theater scene, very staged, with a lot of light and shadows and adding drama to it. So yeah, I'm saying she must have been influenced by her dad. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I saw it, because yeah, there were some paintings of her dad at the National Gallery.
Yeah, I mean, it would completely make sense. She trained under her father, and I think she had four brothers. Her four brothers were also painters, and they were all trained in her father's studio. And her father had lots of artists kind of coming in and out of the studio, sort of training people that specialized in certain areas of painting. They would collaborate, which is something I didn't know at this time. If you were an artist and you were commissioned to paint a court scene, you would also work in collaboration with an artist who perhaps was a master of painting buildings, and you were a figurative artist, and then you would have somebody that came in and painted the foliage. So it was a really interesting time in terms of creativity. And of course, like she must have just watched her dad and learned these amazing skills. But there is a lovely quote that the head of Renaissance painting at the National Gallery, Letizia, I think her name is, from off the top of my head, and she said that there's documents that say Artemisia's father saying that, oh, my daughter, she's been painting independently for 3 years, and she has a talent that is competed by no other, or is in competition with no other. So her father saw her and knew that he had something really special in his hands there, like the way that she could master. I mean, regardless of gender or anything like that, when I look at Judith and her maidservant, and how the clothes that they wear, the detail, how the light hits their face, how they are physically using every ounce of their body weight to pin this man down, it's incredible. And you can feel the struggle, and even how she grabs the general's hair. I feel that the desperation and the I don't know, the speed of which they're acting. I think she just completely captures it in this painting.
You know, I completely agree. I think you can really sense the energy and the physical fight, and it's and everything. Also the facial expression, the drapery, and this blood splashing. It's really, really strong. Yeah, I think it's. I love the energy in the painting. Here's a painting where you're supposed just to stand still and look at it, but you can't stand still. You can just feel the energy and the fight, as you said. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and just for anybody at home that doesn't know the story of Judith and Holofernes, so Judith was this sort of renowned, beautiful Jewish woman, and her city was under attack by an army, and Holofernes was the general, and Judith sort of slipped out of the city with her servant, and sort of dressed in their finest, and said, oh, I'll help you conquer the city. So it's been misinterpreted that she seduced the general, but actually what happened was the general got very drunk and fell asleep, and Judith took her chance with her maidservant and beheaded him as a way of showing that, because essentially she was captured by the army and brought to the general, and the whole idea is these two women brought down an entire army by killing their general, and the whole reason they were able to slip through and meet the general was because of their gender, and they were completely underestimated in their abilities. And I think that's a lovely sort of tip of the cap to surely what Artemisia must have been feeling in a studio training full of men.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think definitely it's really a power fight, and it's two women. Also, I think maybe it also represents society. Two women have to come together really to overcome a man, and it's really
Mm.
about, maybe she's a little bit showing the struggle of women at the time, because yeah, as I said, you belong to a father, to a husband. You were not independent, so I think there's also, yeah, there's a strong message about the position of women in society, and what maybe if women went together, they could fight, also continue to empower themselves, maybe at the time already.
Yeah, I love that idea. I never even thought of that. I absolutely love that. This painting, the scene rather, she painted it twice. So she painted
Yeah.
one in 1612 to 1613, and 1620 to 1621 she revisited the scene. Now, there's a lot of speculation that the scene that she painted, and she painted this just after um, a very traumatic episode in her life that completely changed and would change you as an artist and as a person. She was raped by one of her father's studio hands, who was a fellow artist. And a lot of art historians have sort of leaned into this narrative that this was kind of one of the paintings that she produced after the rape. And the rape is very well documented. She went through an unbelievable trauma in terms of taking the gentleman to trial because he said he would marry her, because apparently during that time, if you were sexually assaulted but then your attacker married you, then that was even Stevens and that was everything forgiven, which is just disgusting. But she was dragged through trial. She was tortured to make sure that she was telling the truth, and she was then married off very quickly and sent away from Rome, kind of in disgrace. And this painting was one of the first that she produced after the trial. And a lot of art historians have really lent into the narrative that it's her fighting back and showing her power as a woman afterwards. I mean, how does that theory sit with you?
Yeah, I think if you look at the first painting, I think the scene is much closer. Maybe the focus is more, the focus is more on Judith rather than the whole scene. But yeah, because when I saw this movie relating a story, of course they're depicting the scene of the trial and everything, and everything she had to go through, being tortured just to prove her innocence. It was pretty horrifying thinking about that. I know people speak a lot about the trial and the rape, etc. But I'm sure it must have had an influence into her painting. And I can just see, I don't know, because this painting, the first one, which is exposed in Napoli, is much more. The scene is much more closer. So maybe it's just the first. No, I would say a first draft, but being much more related, yeah, to her personal story. And then maybe the second one she painted, she took some distance and maybe added some more of a message. I don't know really.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all speculation and narrative, but I do think something like that, and looking at choosing this as one of the first things that comes out of your studio after you've had such after you've gone through a trial and a rape and sort of getting through that, I think it might have in some way have influenced her decision in choosing to depict this, unless this was of course commissioned by a patron. I'm not 100% sure what it was painted for, but yeah, it's got to have some sort of connotations. I mean, it's two women who have been completely undermined in their strength and their power. I think it has a message in it that still is so relevant to women today. I find the power in numbers and a sort of a sisterhood and a bond that I think she just nails what a woman would feel in those situations. I think particularly you've just touched on it briefly, Judith's face, how her eyebrows are down, and it's funny because she's not the only person that's painted this. Caravaggio also has a very very famous scene of Judith beheading, and the Judith in Caravaggio seems very sort of weak and sort of almost very sort of bony, skinny, and she doesn't really know what she looks very sort of like, oh gosh, a bit sort of disgusted by her act, whereas Judith here has really taken power and almost kind of mounting the bed to this act. It's an unbelievable painting. You could look at it forever and still find things to talk about, even how he's grabbing her maid's sort of collar here in attempts to push her off. You can just see from the grip of his hand of desperation around this maid is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I've seen the Caravaggio painting, and I agree, it's completely. I think the focus is definitely not on the women, and they look a bit more. They're not really in the act. While what Artemisia has shown is really a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, boldness, and she really put the women into the scene. She gives power to the women, while in the Caravaggio painting you don't have this feeling really. So definitely, I think in all her painting, when you look at it, she definitely gives power to the woman depicted.
That's a nice point to sort of move on, because you've picked another really iconic work from Artemisia, which really, funnily enough, I have just recorded another episode with another woman called Melody, and she selected this painting as well. And we speak about how stories within art are hidden. So for this, when you look at it, you don't really think of this what's going on in the scene. So this is a painting called Susanna and the Elders. But what I didn't realize is she's only about 17 when she paints this. Yeah. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I think she must have felt this at the time also in society. How many young girls were married to somebody older? How many, and this girl didn't have any power. If somebody decided, okay, I want to marry you, and the guy was 30 years older, they didn't have much of a choice. So I think maybe this scene is also related to maybe what she experienced in society at the time, but also to show, giving maybe a message also to show to women that it's okay to show your power. It's okay not to accept advantage like that, and really especially from two elderly men. I think she's really depicting something that a lot of women must have experienced at the time. And I think this painting is very it could be today. I think unfortunately we are still even after Me Too, we are still fighting, we are still trying to find our position in society, and really fighting the harassment and things like that. And it's just so actual, I would say, this painting.
You've just hit the nail on the head there. When you really think about what's happening in this story, and for anyone that doesn't know the story behind Susanna and the Elders, Susanna is this beautiful woman, and she's gone off to bathe, and two elders of the community, so they're actually judges, follow her to the bathing pool and essentially say to her, you have to sort of succumb to our sexual advances, or we'll tell the whole town that you've slept with us anyway, and will completely ruin yours and your family's reputation. And Susanna says, no, I'll take my chances. No one's going to believe you. No. And she was right. No one believed them. But it's just exactly what you said there. When you think about how many times as a woman you have been approached by people, or things have happened, you've heard stories of women receiving unsolicited comments, advances. It's like, why something that was painted hundreds of years ago is still repeating stories that are happening every day now is frightening. And again, I think the fact that it's when you look at Susanna here, she's just so repulsed by the men that she's just like, get away from me, because they've betrayed their status as elders and as people that you look towards. They're abusing their power. And again, that's another thing that's very, particularly of Me Too, an abuse of power over women.
Yeah, no, completely. I think, and what Artemisia showed, I think that the composition is quite vindictive of this painting, and probably of her own life. And I love also the drama in it. The focus, Susanna is much larger and bigger than the two men. So it's really the focus on Susanna and really fighting for herself, really standing up for herself. I think Artemisia has such strong messages in her painting, and she's putting probably a lot of herself in it. And as you said, yeah, the story of Susanna, she managed to overcome the two men and really show that she wouldn't be manipulated. So I think a lot in Artemisia shows she depicts strong women, she depicts women who are fighting, she depicts women standing up for herself. And it's, I think what I find fascinating, it's the Renaissance, but it could be today as well. Of course, we had a lot of evolution when you look at it, especially about the women's right and everything. But as you said, it's pretty amazing that some of this story is still happening nowadays. It's still about, unfortunately,
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's so, I know I'd never noticed that Susanna actually is so much larger than the two men. Actually, I think that's a really amazing thing to point out. And it just must have been, again, think about this, she was 17. I don't even think she was allowed to go out without her father's permission. That's how much women were controlled back then. But men had the freedom to go wherever they wanted. And there's accounts of male artists continuously visiting her father's studios, and she was renowned for how beautiful she was. So there's no way that she wasn't harassed in any way. So I do feel like she's probably digging from experience here, because Susanna's just so annoyed and so just fed up looking of, oh, just leave me alone. And it's painting that I think a lot of Renaissance paintings do this really well. They look a little bit boring and you don't really know what the story is behind them, but actually once you sort of take the time and learn the story and what's actually happening and think about it a little bit, it's incredibly interesting and really powerful, particularly this one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of the Renaissance painting, maybe women are not so much in the foreground. Of course, a lot is painted on, from history. But I think here she's not scared to put the women in the foreground and really to have the women to be in a bold position and really showing her anger, and that she's not accepting what's going on. Yeah, no, I think it's pretty amazing. And it's really, really, I think it's another strong image when you come across it. You see these two men really menacing, and this woman which has to fight, and she's naked, and this man's are dressed, and she's in a vulnerable position. So Artemisia really managed to show her vulnerability and how this man were really menacing. And I think you can't be indifferent when you see that painting. It's you have your own way to interpret it, but it's very, very strong. I think you can't just stay still and think, this you can see something is happening there, and the woman is not accepting it. She's really fighting for herself.
Yeah. Tell me, was this in the National Gallery show?
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure it was, because I think it must have. I'm not sure I saw this painting before. Mm-hmm. And I think it was at National Gallery, and I think that's why I was struck. It struck me.
Yeah, I mean, because it would just be interesting to know sort of the size of it, because I know Artemisia, she did like to work on very large scale.
Oh yes, a lot of the painting were really, really large.
Which again must have just. I always say to people, like, you really need to think when somebody was viewing this, in 1610, 1620, and they didn't have the modern day distractions that we do. They don't have Netflix and special effects and all these things. And if it in our society today can completely stop you in your tracks and bowl you over, what on earth must it have been like to see it freshly painted in the city with the artist there? I mean, I think Artemisia is more and more becoming, do you know that question that people ask, like, oh, if you had an imaginary dinner party, what 10 people or 5 people, dead or alive? She's definitely up there. She's one of them. She is one of the guests.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I would love to meet her. I think this is a really amazing woman. And I was lucky enough to see one of the Judith and Holophant painting in Florence. I think it was two years ago. And they're really, yeah, they have these special rooms with red walls as well. And it was, yeah, I think it was really amazing to see it in Italy as well.
Oh, is that in the Uffizi?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So I am long overdue another trip out to Florence. I haven't been since I was 21, which is like 10 plus years ago now. But oh my goodness, yeah, I think going back now a little bit older and wiser and really sort of understanding what I really appreciated it and loved it at the time. But I think to go back and re-see all these brilliant things would just be amazing. But speaking of Judith, this was a subject that she returned to again and again, but there's another painting that you've included as well, which I think I had seen, but it was again, another artist had attempted the subject, and then obviously Artemisia has just completely taken it and made it her own, and that's Judith and her maidservant.
Yeah, that's right. And I discovered these two versions. So there were the two versions at the National Gallery, but I had trouble to find some information on the first version. There's a version where you just had it's a smaller painting where you have the two women together, and the composition is their body is facing each other, but then the faces are looking away because I think they're scared to be discovered. At some point you see a woman with a basket, and if you're not looking through too many details, in fact there's the head of Holophant in it, so they're trying to, it's the moment where they escape. And then there's another painting which was much more dramatic, which where she depicts a yellow dress, and so this one is much more dramatic. It's more, I would say, Caravaggio-esque,
yeah,
with a really extraordinary contrast between light and dark element. But I love both painting because I think even the smaller one, I love the composition. The composition is really strong. You see that something is happening in the scene. You're not really sure about it, but then you have to come closer. And the other one is more about dramatic. There's more movement, there's more energy. There's really it's really about very, very strong and bold, because she also uses splash of colors, the other one is much more subdued.
Yeah, so I've looked at the first one that you're describing a little bit, where it's waist up, and I'm looking at the one with the yellow dress, Judith one now, and I just, oh my gosh, it's just unbelievable. Like the vibrant colors and the folds of the dress, everything about it is, this to me is Artemisia at her peak. This is phenomenal, and this is a subject. I mean, when was this? I think this might have been this 1620s, 1630s. She painted this.
I think the first one was painting 1618, 1619, and then the second one 1623, and you can really see that the maturity also of the painter in it, because it's so different. I think the first one is much more, it's quieter, it's even the colors are more subdued, but then the second one, she goes for it. She's really, I think maybe she's much more confident in her capability as a painter. And she's really not holding back. It's I think her maturity as a woman and as a painter, it's definitely much more stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think every point of the painting that I'm looking at, even Judith's maid sort of putting the head in this bag, the head is like this really sort of sickly blue green, obviously because it's been decapitated. It's just, the handling's amazing, and obviously that this is them depicting, as you've said previously, their moment of escape, and she's perhaps heard a noise, you're not too sure what's happening, but they're both sort of looking off to the side of the painting. Perhaps somebody's coming towards the tent. You just kind of wonder, oh, are they going to get caught? What happens? And I think it's just, she's such a phenomenal storyteller.
Yeah, I completely agree. And because I'm a photographer, so as the way she uses the light really to enhance the drama is really, really amazing. And then you have all the details in we call it rapist.
Yeah.
the draperies, which is really, really amazing. And the candlelight, which I don't know, I guess must have been Caravaggio influence. But the sense of detail is, and I was lucky enough to see all this painting from close up, and it's I find the detail, the work really, really amazing, because she had such a sense of being able to paint all this little detail, to create more drama, to really represent the light, the shadows, and really to invite the viewer into the painting. I think really invite in, as you said, an amazing storyteller.
I don't know if you've seen this, but Google Arts and Culture, they have like teamed up with musicians, and there's a series where essentially the musicians pick an artist that they love and they discuss paintings, and they're just like 5 or 6 minute videos, lots of different musicians discussing lots of artists. And Artemisia has been chosen by an artist called FKA Twigs. So she has chosen Artemisia as one of her inspirations, and she speaks, funnily enough, about the Judith series, and sort of points out that when you zoom into these paintings, and particularly Judith when she's wearing this yellow dress, you can even see a very, very sort of fight, that there's still blood like dripping from the sword, and it's just slightly suggested, but you can see it sort of also kind of glistening, and I just think the detail is mind-blowing. It's so good.
The detail is amazing, and I think hopefully one day you will be lucky to see them really in the museum. It's just amazing, the work, I think the time she must have spent on this painting. It's and also to create such drama, and really for the viewer to be invited, and this amazing storytelling, because you look at the picture and you can just create your own stories.
I mean, as a photographer, Rachel, I mean, surely, what do you admire most about this as an artist yourself? Is it the composition? Is it the handling of light? I mean, from an artist.
It's definitely the light is really because when I started photography, I said I'm going to be a natural light photographer. I'm never going to learn the light in the studio. It's too complicated. And then I had to learn about it, and I fell in love with it, because I think what you can do with lighting is really amazing. You can create drama, and of course it's also the composition. But I think for me it's the light. That's what I love in the Renaissance painting, is all the light, the light and shadows they created. Are you calling it clair obscur or something? So this is I think it's because it's really attracting. With light you can attract the attention, you can create a story with it. So and of course I love the costume, everything about this. I love everything about this, and the primary color she uses, the strong yellow, the red, and as you said, the green to show the decapitated head. But she uses, I think, she uses all the tools she could have to create an amazing story. She uses the light, she uses the composition, she uses the colors, and then all the details. I think she's really, I don't know, she's a all-rounded artist, I would say.
And I loved what you said earlier about, you can see that she's really sort of coming to her like maturity here. I like, it's amazing. And anyone that's listening, please do go away and have a look at these images, or you can find them on my Instagram highlights reel under the number of this episode, and I'll tell you again at the end of the episode how you can view them. And so don't worry about that, but I would seriously recommend, if you're listening at home, please go away and have a look at these images. If you haven't ever seen anything by Artemisia, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're in for a brilliant surprise. For me, the light in this is insane, and I could talk about this all day, but I understand I've only got you for a limited amount of time. So I think let's move on and talk about your last work, which you have sent me. And this is such a curveball in what I'm used to in terms of Artemisia. Whenever I've seen her work before, I don't ever think I've seen this one before.
You know what? Me neither. In fact, I saw it at the National Gallery, and this is really,
Oh,
really huge. And this is very theatrical. I think it's a huge painting. It's really, I think it's half a wall. It was so big, and of course, it creates a lot of impact. And again, what I love in this painting, it's again a woman fighting off, standing up for herself, but also she makes this use of strong colors of the drama, and the man is in a lower position. And for me, Coriska, she looks much bigger than the satire.
yeah.
So again, it's her message is here again. But yeah, I first saw this painting at the National Gallery. I didn't even know about it, but I think I discovered that it has only been recently attributed to Artemisia. I think they thought it was from another painter.
Yeah. But
And
interestingly, they thought it was another female painter of her time, though, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I read that as well, that they found her, they did some cleaning and then they found her signature on the tree trunk or something, which is really dark, actually. It's a really, really dark tree trunk. Yeah, this was just such a curveball when you sent me this. I was like, oh, I just didn't think this would have been something that she would have done. But I love it. And what I really love is Coriska is once again, it's kind of like a woman tricking a man. So for anybody that doesn't, well, this is, I had never heard of the story. Apparently this was taken from an inspiration from an Italian fable, and it was a play. And Coriska had been accepting gifts from the satyr of clothes and sandals, and when she accepted them, the satyr took this as, I can have my way with you, and he tries to rape her, and he grabs her by the hair, but she's wearing a wig, so he's just kind of left holding this wig, looking really confused and shocked, and it lets her escape away from the satyr. And I just loved it because again, it's another woman who has been underestimated and seen as this plaything for this man, and she's been like, absolutely no way, I'm off. Which is so, and he's just, and I love that he's just holding this wig, because at first glance I was like, what on earth is he holding? So when I was googling trying to find more information about it, I was like, oh, what a good story.
Yeah, and I also read that, in fact, it's also a bit like in Susanna and the Elders, her appearance has been shattered, and she manages to escape with her dignity as well, because at the time, I think for women to have long hair and their hair really is something of representing beauty, and but she's not faced about it, and she rather escapes and sacrifices her hair than being taken by this satire.
I mean, I can't even imagine how this must have looked as a full scale, because I think it's not in a public collection, is it? I think it's a private collection.
It is a private collection, you're right. Yeah, no, it's one of her biggest painting. I think it made me think of her dad's painting. There were 2 or 3 of her dad's painting which were really, really large, really like a theater scene, and this one is really one of the largest, and it looks like you could be in front of a theater scene, in fact.
Really? Oh my gosh. See, I think this is the great trick about when you view art and paintings online. I always get the sizing so completely wrong. I used to work for a sculpture gallery, and the amount of times I would look at an image of a sculpture and then it would arrive at the gallery and it was something that you could hold in your hand, and I thought it was going to be this huge monumental thing, and vice versa, this thing that I was like, oh, it's tiny, and it turned up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need 4 people to move this. Yeah, I just wonder what private collection it is and how lucky they are that they just get to look at something like this every day.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. But what I was surprised as well, I think we hear a lot of painters were really struggling during the Renaissance, even just to get money. But she seemed to have a lot of benefactors, and what apparently what they love about her was her use of emotion. I think maybe the other painters were really a bit more because they were men, maybe they didn't know how to use the emotion. But yeah, apparently the fact that she was really bold and used a lot of very expressive painting and emotion attracted a lot of benefactors who wanted painting from her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that she sent out quite a lot of paintings as well, just to try and say to people, oh, this is what I can do, commission me. which is amazing. And she was very much welcomed into artistic communities wherever she went. I mean, I think regardless of her gender at the time, I think no one could deny that she was
Yeah. Yeah,
unbelievably
it's pretty amazing. She has been commissioned by kings, and yeah, they didn't really look into it. I think they looked more at her talent and what she could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And what an interesting life she must have had. She must have been one of the only women in studios across the world, and the people that she must have known and met at that time as well. Because there's accounts that her and Galileo were quite good friends and that they mixed in the same circles and they used to write to each other. So the amount of great sort of thinkers and artists, and again, I think she knew ever so slightly Caravaggio. But yeah, just what things she like. It's such a shame that that there's no sort of document surviving, or that she didn't keep a diary or something like that, so she could just to be in her head for a day and what she experienced.
Yeah. But also, I think the Renaissance was a fascinating time. I think, as you say, Galileo, so many things happening, and yeah. So I'm sure she was a very curious mind, and the fact that she couldn't be probably maybe get proper education, but yeah, it must have been fascinating to live at this time to really. And she was lucky as a woman to be able to learn, to travel, to discover, to go into the right circles, to discover all these things. Who must have an influence on her painting as well.
Yeah, and so what keeps catching me with this painting is her incredible green sandals under this sort of ochre yellow dress that I would wear them now. I love them. But what I think is really important to remind people is this is at a time where you didn't just go into your cupboard and open a paint tube and off paint came. You had to physically mix all your colors. So as well as being an incredible painter, your mixology and sort of science skills in terms of mixing your paints and matching colors, it's just incredible when you really, really think about it. And I'm sure maybe she had a studio assistant, I don't know, but really every time she wanted a color, she would have had to have mixed it from scratch.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. And what I love also in the Corisca and the satire is the movement. It's I think maybe this woman looks even more free than the others, because Susanna is sitting down, the others are really over a man. But for me, this one, she's in movement. I don't know, she's evolving even a bit more.
Yeah, true. I suppose because she's kind of been freed from, I don't know, her wig, and she's just kind of like, oh, whatever, and off she runs. But it's such a beautiful image. I can't stop staring at the color of the dress. And and it's so funny. Like I can't take my eyes off the figure. I can't take my eyes off Corisca. I just can't. But in the satire, I've kind of okay, I've seen him, but I can't stop looking at the female figure in it. And I suppose that's exactly what she was wanting you to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I agree with you. I love the color of the dress and all the details. You can just feel the fabric. It's amazing. And then you have this purple, kind of purple scarf on top of it. And yeah, I think the detail is really, you could just feel everything here in the scene and how she's moving as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Rachel, I have absolutely loved talking to you about this, and it's been amazing to spend my afternoon sort of down an Artemisia rabbit hole and discussing these incredible paintings. And I'm very, very tempted to go away and buy the National Gallery exhibition catalogue, because I'm sure it's filled with essays and amazing things. But thank you so much. I've absolutely loved talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Jo. I've been, I could talk about Artemisia for ages, and it's wonderful to speak to someone who is as passionate about Artemisia as me. So thank you so much. Yeah, it has been wonderful talking to you.
No, thank you. So before you go, and before I let you sort of tell everyone where they can connect with you, I do ask everybody one question, or I try and remember and ask everybody the same question, and it's quite a large one, so you can make it as large or as specific to you as an artist. So, and the question is, why is art important?
Why is art important? As a photographer, I recently started a fine art project because in photography, of course, I was influenced by Artemisia. I wanted to do something a bit more Renaissance. I started this project. I hired costume at the National Theatre, and then I had to stop because of COVID, and I didn't know what I would do with this project. And then, because maybe I had to stop, I realized, in fact, this project is a bit like Artemisia. What I wanted to do is to give a voice to women who didn't have one at the time. And what I developed portrait through time. So I went from the Renaissance to Regency time, in the Victorian period, and I hope to move on and to show bolder and bolder women. It's just, for me, art is a way to express things that I think it's probably, as an artist, it's very something that comes from yourself. And for me, I call this project a quiet rebellion, because it's something, nothing is really happening in the pictures, but for me it's just little detail. It's just starting with maybe a little butterfly fluttering their wings, and then it's going to move on. But it's really also, for me, through this project, is to give a voice to the women who, like at Artemisia's time, they were not allowed to be educated. They were not independent. They couldn't really earn money. They belonged to a father, to brothers, to a husband. So I think this is really, really something very powerful for me. And I think art is really a way to express things where you are deeply connected with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you answered that beautifully there. It's just a way of communicating with something that words can't. I just think art is just an unbelievable gift, and a gift that keeps on giving and keeps on sparking conversations. And I love how people just develop it in their own way and run with it, and there's no right or wrong way of doing it either. And that's what I love. So Rachel, please do send me images of your Quiet Rebellion project, and I'd love to share them when the podcast goes live. It would just be great if you're comfortable with me doing that.
Of course, I would love to do that. Yes.
But once again, thank you so much for coming on. And where can people find you and connect with you?
So people can find me. So I'm going to spell my because I'm using my maiden name as an artist. So they can find me on Instagram and under Rachel Vogeleisen. So it's Rachel and then VOGELEISEN.com. And then I have a website about all my fine art print, which is called rachelvogeleisenprint.com. Okay,
that's amazing. And I will leave links in the show notes of the podcast for people to find you there. And when I post about it on Instagram as well, I'll tag you and add a link to your website so people can explore your work.
Wonderful.
Rachel, once again, thank you so much. I've had a lovely time chatting with you.
Me too. Thank you so much, Jo. It has been wonderful.
And there you have it, another episode of Jo's Art History podcast. Once again, I just want to thank Rachel for coming on and speaking so brilliantly about Artemisia Gentileschi. Artemisia is an incredibly interesting artist across the board, really, not only in the time that she was making art, but also her ability to secure patrons in a world who really sort of overlooked women in terms of their ability, both in society, let alone artistically, and things that she survived and came through, and is still this incredible artist. So it was a real honour to spend an hour talking about Artemisia. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you like, rate and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss another episode. And if you are able to, it would mean a lot to me if you could leave me a review on either iTunes, and you can now leave reviews on Spotify. While you were listening, if you thought of anybody who might like to listen as well, please do feel free to pass on the episode to them. It would be lovely to get as many people as possible listening to the podcast. If you would like to get in touch, please feel free. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can message me via Instagram @joesarthistory. My DMs are always open, and it's lovely to hear from listeners. I've had quite a few people message me recently, which is always lovely to hear, and I'm delighted that new people are finding the podcast all the time. It does mean a lot. If you'd like to see any of the images which Rachel and I discussed throughout this episode, please go to my Instagram highlights reel, and this is episode 48. So if you go along to number 48, you'll find the images there. Finally, my name is Jo McLaughlin, your host and your resident art historian here on Jo's Art History Podcast, and I look forward to welcoming you next time. Until then, keep learning and remember, art is for all. Bye.